Hello everyone, my name is Chelsea and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I have my March wrap up. So normally I've been doing my book haul and wrap up in the same video. I bought way too many books in the month of March, so I actually already posted that video on Tuesday. I will leave it linked down below in case you have not seen it. So this is just going to be stats and wrap up. So I read a total of 14 books in March with no DNFs this month for a total of 4,247 pages. That is the highest amount of pages I have read in a month so far. We'll see if I can keep that going because that's actually quite a bit for me, but like at the same time I'm very pleased. I read 8 physical books and 6 ebooks, so almost a half and half split, which is what I think I'm going for right now. For the genre, again, we were all over the place. I read 4 fantasy books, 4 horror books, 2 contemporaries, 1 romance, 1 science fiction, 1 retelling, and 1 adventure. For the format of the books, 11 of them were novels, 1 was a manga, 1 was a graphic novel or comic, and 1 was a short story collection. As for indie versus traditional, 12 were traditionally published and 2 were indies. How I got them: I have been doing very well about reading my owned books, my owned TBR. However, I still think I did pretty well this month. I ended up reading more gifted ones as well. So I had 6 books that I read that I owned previous to this year. 4 of them were books that were gifted to me. 2 of them were ARCs or advanced reader copies, and 2 of them were ones that I bought this year. I think we have slowly started to get into, I have bought myself some books and we are now starting to read them. The age category for them, I read 12 adult books and 2 young adult books. And then let's go to the star rating. I did not have any 1 stars because I did not have any DNFs, so my average rating is actually like a 3.89, so almost a 4 stars right now. So even though I'm still having a lot of all over the board ratings, they are higher than the previous 2 months. So I ended up having 1 2-star, 2 3 stars, 2 3.5 stars, 5 4 stars, 1 4.5 star, and 3 5-star reads, which, like I said, is better than we had been doing. So what I will end up doing now is going from my worst book of the month to my favorite book of the month. So my lowest rated book is Thinner by Stephen King. I am having a Stephen King vlog series that I'm doing. This is from the 1980s, so it is not out yet, but that means anything that I talk about for Stephen King stuff will not be super long-winded because I will get into it in more detail in those vlogs. But I read Thinner. I did not like Thinner. I thought it was grossly fat-phobic and very hateful toward the Romani people. I do think this as a story could be better served to be written in a different way. So yeah, 2 stars. Moving into my 3-star reads, the first one I have here is Can't Escape Love by Alyssa Cole. This is the last book I needed to read in the Reluctant Royal series. This is a novella, which I thought was going to be much higher rated until the end of this book. This is like 100 and something pages, under 200 pages, and basically we have characters who come together because they had met like doing live streams about puzzles and stuff, and our main female character owns the Girls with Glasses website in this world of the Reluctant Royal series. Her sister is Portia from book 2. Actually, they're twin sisters, so we do get to hear about her in book 2 and, you know, hear about Portia a little bit in this one. They seem to happen a little bit concurrently, this novella and book 2, and book 2 was my favorite one out of the entire series, and so I was very excited to get into this one and read it, and I really liked the romance option that we had here. Like, I really liked how they were getting together and dealing with puzzle rooms and this convention that was coming up. And the thing is, we get to the end of this novella where literally the end is, I love you, done. They spend so long with this like escape room puzzle element being a core plot point of the book and their romance, and we never see it come to fruition. It literally feels like we just ended, like we're missing half the book. Like it feels like we're missing half the book, and we're not. It's just a novella, and like it was developed so well until a certain point, and even the circumstances of where they say I love you felt forced, that like I was just like, why did we end it there? So this is a 3-star read because I feel like I was cheated. I felt like there should have been more to the story because it was going so well, and so yeah, this is disappointing. My next 3-star read was In Between by MJ James. I talked about this during the Trans Rights Readathon vlog that I have. I will leave it linked down below. This is an adult fantasy where our main character is a single mother who has autism and is also asexual and aromantic. My biggest issue with this book, why I gave it 3 stars, is that the actual fantasy aspect of this is not something that is brought about because of this single mother. It is brought about by her 8-year-old having magic. And so my biggest thing with this one is that it felt like our main character had no agency. Like our main character didn't feel like it should have been this mother. An 8-year-old is a little young. Like if we were gonna go for a middle grade protagonist, like I do think maybe he should have been a little bit older. Like I understand why the author didn't have him be the main character, but everything that was happening is like trying to have this 8-year-old go on an adventure, have magic, go save this kingdom, and his mother's just along for the ride and sort of hindering the ride. And like I really did like her as a mother. I really did like the representation that we had, especially with the autistic representation. I wished the asexual and aromantic representation was a little bit more in the forefront, because with the way that this character talked about it, it almost felt like it was just, I didn't like this guy because he wasn't for me, not I tried to date and I realized I do not want a romance, do not have the capability for this romance, or do not enjoy sex. Like, we didn't have the concreteness that I would have wished for representation, but I do understand why the author did it the way they did it. So like the representation, especially because most of this is own voices representation for the author, I did think was well done. The actual fantasy storyline aspect I don't think was served as well with this main character. However, this author does have a sci-fi that just came out at the end of March called The Immortal Part of Myself. And I'm very curious about that one because it's going to get into more of the representation that is own voices for this author, because this is actually a non-binary author, and I do believe the main character in the new book does eventually identify as like genderqueer or something like that, so I'm very curious about that. And I love sci-fi. This author and I are actually sort of friends, and we talk about sci-fi stuff and Star Trek stuff, and so I do think that is one I definitely want to check out. Moving into my 3.5 stars, I do feel like this category is more of like I was being picky. We'll get there. My first one here is Rosaline Palmer Takes the Cake by Alexis Hall. I gave this 3.5 stars, and I actually had this as my first Patreon book club pick. We had a great discussion about it. We actually had a few different ratings. Like I know somebody gave it a 4 stars, somebody gave it a 4.5 stars. One of the people that wasn't able to actually come to that group at that time DNF'd it completely. And like I love the fact that we had a lot of different ratings. My biggest reason why this is a 3.5 star is that this is billed as a romance. I do not think it qualifies as a romance, because most of this book is about our main character of Rosaline sort of trying to be in a romantic relationship with the wrong guy. And so when you're looking for certain romantic elements, it doesn't really fit that way. If this was more of just a contemporary story, because we do also have a lot of the baking show, because she's going on a baking competition show, I love those parts, but that's also a very big part of the story. She's a single mother going on to this baking show trying to win, and I loved those sort of elements, but I kept expecting romance. And I was not being given that romance. So if I would have gone in with different expectations, if it wasn't billed as here is a romance by Alexis Hall, because I know Alexis Hall, he has tons of romance books, and like I love boyfriend material, which is a romance. If I went into it knowing what to expect, really, I might have given it a 4. I still don't think it necessarily would have been a 5, but I gave it a 3.5 because it was just not what I was expecting from it, and I was really wanting romance, which was not delivered. My other 3.5 is Cujo by Stephen King. Like I said, this one will be talked about in the 1980s vlog, so I can't get into it a ton. This is actually pretty good for a Stephen King. Some things have been hits, some things have been complete misses. I mean, we just talked about Thinner. The reason this is a 3.5 instead of a 4, because I was really getting into it, is 1, Stephen King is a little long-winded. It does get a little slow in places, but 2, this ending. I'm just gonna leave it at that. If you've seen the movie, it's completely different than this book. I was mad at this ending, and so I gave it a 3.5, even though I probably could have given it a 4. It wasn't necessarily bad, but like, I was mad at it. Moving into my 4-star reads, this is where I have the majority of my reads right now. My first 4 is 7 Secrets, issue 1 by Tom Taylor. This is an issue of a comic, so it was only like 26 pages, part of the reason it's a 4. If I was reading the first volume of this comic, where it's like a comic bind up and it's like the first 4 issues, I do have the feeling that this might be a higher one, because I did enjoy what I read, it just wasn't enough. Basically, this is a comic series about 7 wonders or 7 secrets that have to be protected. I don't know if they're things or places or what they are exactly yet, but this first issue is following 2 different people, because each secret has like a keeper and a protector sort of thing, and it's introducing the fact that there are other people in this organization, and why they have to keep the secrets, but like, we don't really know much. So because of the fact that we don't know much, but I did enjoy what I read, it's a 4-star. The next 4-star is Pet Sematary by Stephen King. This was actually sort of a surprise, because I have read this before, back like in high school, and I gave it 3 stars. I do think I appreciated it more now as a 33-year-old than back when I was probably like 15 or 16. But it does get a little slow in places because it gets a little bit rambly. The horror doesn't come really until near the end, but I did like what I read, so 4 stars. The next 4 stars, another Stephen King. However, this one actually I did talk about in the 1970s vlog, so I will leave a link down below. This is a short story collection that I really did enjoy. I'm not the biggest short story person, and there were some short stories that weren't as good, but there were quite a few that I rated 4 or 5 stars, and I liked. So if you want more information, like I said, I go through more detail, like almost every single story in that vlog. But yeah, some of them are very grotesque and horrific, and I loved them. My next 4-star is Recursion by Blake Crouch. This is one that I actually was gifted by Lena from Sufficiently Advanced Lena. We do have pretty similar tastes, especially in sci-fi books, and I think this might have been her favorite Blake Crouch. I am very curious about Dark Matter now, because I did like this one. It has to deal with time travel and memories and like rewriting time and stuff, and it was very intriguing that way. However, there is a romance in here that feels like it just got shoehorned in, especially because it doesn't start until after certain timelines happen, and because of that, we're just sort of like, by the way, this had happened to this other character previously, by them telling a different character, and then it's supposed to happen again, and I don't know, it just felt very unnecessary and didn't have that connection to the characters that I was expecting to have. Like, if I was gonna have a romance and want to root for these people, I should want to understand how this came about and want to root for them, and I didn't. I did like the memory and time travel aspect. It did get a little bit repetitive near the end, and it's a short book. Like, it was very quick to read, but I was just hoping for a little bit more like conciseness maybe from this story. And then my last 4-star is Spellbound by F.T. Lukens. This is actually a book that is coming out on April 4th, so I read it as an arc. And this is my first F.T. Lukens. I really enjoyed this one. We basically are following our main character of Rook, who has no magic and is figuring out how to get back into the magical world, because his grandmother used to have magic, but when his grandmother passed away, they said, you don't have magic, you can't be here. And he's trying to work his way back in by like becoming the apprentice, or even an office worker for Antonia Hex, who is a sorcerer or magician who definitely has magic. And then we actually have another main character of Sun, who is non-binary and is serving a different sorcerer as their apprentice as well. And my reasoning for giving this a 4-star, because I really liked the characters, I really liked the found family vibes, and I really liked the romance between Rook and Sun as well. Everything was developed very well, especially since this is a YA fantasy. But the summary of this book, that you like read the summary, it takes like 60% or more before we actually get past the summary and get into the action. Like, I kept waiting for something that was on the back of the book to happen. And I say the back of the book, I don't have a book, it was an arc. So just the summary, like on Goodreads and stuff, I knew what to expect because I've talked about this book in my like anticipated releases video. And so I knew something was gonna happen. It took forever to get there, and so once we got there, it just felt like a little bit rushed to the end. Like, I really did love the characters and the found family and everything, but the plot, it just needed to be sped up a little bit. Moving into my 4.5-star read, it is going to be Princess Jellyfish Volume 1. This is actually an omnibus edition, so I think it's like volumes 1 and 2 by Akiko Higashimura. This is a reread for me, and I originally gave this book 5 stars. Now I gave it 4.5, and I think the biggest reason for this is how they talk about certain things in this book. Now, granted, this book originally came out like in 2008, was that right? Okay, it originally came out in 2009. The omnibus editions came out in like 2016, so I remember reading these back then, like college age, 19, 20, something like that. Absolutely loving these. Basically, we have our main character of Tsukimi, who is a very geeky girl, lives with these other very geeky girls, and they have very special interests. The way that they talk about each other, I don't mind too much, but she ends up going out one night and going to a pet store, and her like special interest is jellyfish, and she sees this jellyfish that is going to end up dying, and so in order to save it, this very glamorous woman helps her. And these geeky girls do not like glamorous women, so we do have a little bit of prejudice that way, but it's not like anything super crazy. It's just based on, you know, personal life experiences. But the way that Kuranosuke talks about these women sometimes is very, I don't know, belittling of their situation. One of the girls has an afro, that is just how their hair is, and the fact that they talk about it like in order to be beautiful you have to change that rubbed me the wrong way. But also, Kuranosuke is not a woman. Let's just go with that. He is cross-dressing to get out of political work. And so while this is a valid life choice, because of the fact that he does not see himself as trans or gay or even like a drag queen sort of thing, this is literally just a means to an end, sometimes they do say some things that sound negative toward people who are those other things. And so reading it now as a 33-year-old in 2023, I do still really enjoy the story. I want to continue it and I want to read more, but there were little things that I was like, I don't know if I had the wherewithal to know how uncomfortable those made me before, or if it was just maybe something that I wasn't aware of, you know what I mean? I still really like this. I still want to continue. I still want to finish the series, but it's just not a full 5-star read anymore because of those things. Then we are moving into the 5-star reads. I did have 3 of them this month, which I was super happy about. The first one I have here is Greymist Fair by Francesca Zappia. The reason it's the lowest 5-star I have here is because partway through, like as I started reading this, I wasn't entirely sure it was going to be a 5-star read. This is an arc that came out at the end of March. But I absolutely loved it. It's basically a YA fantasy about Greymist Fair, which is a town in the woods. Sometimes you can get there, sometimes you can't. There are monsters in the woods, so you have to like stay on this road. But it ends up being more of like short stories about this town. And some of them are in the present day, some of them are in their past, and they do connect beautifully. But as I was starting to read them and realizing that like, oh, here's this short story about, you know, the seamstress, and here's this short story about a prince, and here's this short story about this, it was like I wasn't entirely sure that I was liking it as much. until you start to continue to read and you realize that they all do connect. They might just be different timelines, and I did actually like the jumping around of the different timelines. I'm not the biggest person that way. I do usually like to read in chronological order, but it literally came together so beautifully for how this town and story and stuff worked out. Like, I was so happy by the end, but because of the fact that I wasn't too sure how I felt about it at first, like, oh, it was probably at least a 4-star, but no, I loved it. It's the lowest 5-star I have here. The second 5-star read I have is Cinder Ella by St. Lynn. This was a book that I read for the Trans Rights Readathon, so I will, again, have the video and everything linked down below. This is a short story that I helped fund on Kickstarter. There was actually 3 short stories because they're like all in the same series. They're like black trans fairy tales. And so this one is Cinderella, and our Cinderella is actually a trans feminine character. She is a woman 100%. However, I will say that there is dead naming and stuff in here because of the fact that, like, the stepmother and stepsisters aren't very nice, but also because they're not very nice, Ella has not, like, come out to them either. So they do definitely use her dead name and stuff. I will also say it's sapphic. I did not expect it to be sapphic, but I absolutely loved it. Like, 100% ate it up, one sitting read. I loved everything about it. It was very heartwarming. Like, I just really loved it. I will say I looked up some reviews and stuff afterwards, and I have some friends that were a little bit more critical of it than me. Not in a bad way, but more in a, like, I know this is a fairy tale retelling, but I would like the magic system to be better developed, or I would like to know what time period we're in. I didn't care. I just really like to rate with, like, my gut reaction. How did I feel about it? And I loved it, so yeah. And then my last 5-star read, my favorite book of the month, is The Deep by Rivers Solomon. Again, another book that I read for the Trans Rights Readathon. This was a gift by Olivia-Savannah from Olivia's Catastrophe, and yes, I absolutely love this one. It was a very beautiful read, very quick to read because it is a novella. I've heard from Bree from Locked Petition, because I did a, like, reading sprint day when I was reading this one, that she even liked this book more upon a reread, and I do think it would be very good to do a reread of this eventually. But I loved it. I loved this so much. Basically, we're following Yetu, who is our main character. She is one of the Wajinru, which is like a type of mermaid sort of thing in this world, and they are all descended from drowned African slaves who were pregnant. Like, they were thrown overboard from ships coming to the Americas, and the babies that they had were born in the ocean after the mothers had died, and they turned into this Wajinru. I really did love the look of the histories that they had, the memories that they had, and like everything about this story. I really loved it. So yeah, that's all I can really say because it is so short, but that's what you're getting into. It was beautiful. I love this one so much. And that is everything. So like I said, I did have my haul earlier in the week just because I did way too many to have it all in one video. But if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up to let me know. Subscribe to this channel if you'd like to see more videos. I do currently have videos coming out on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so I will see you then. Bye!